All right, sweet. Looks like we're up and running on the book. And then I'm going to just hit broadcast and
Okay.
then good afternoon. We'll be rock and rolling. All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on our chamber chat on Monday, the 8th. My name is PJ Prunty. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce, and I'm excited to be hosting Chase Caldwell, the owner of One Plug Entertainment, a fellow Danbury High grad of the late 2000s. I'm not going to say the exact date if you don't want to have your age go public here, but Chase, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Appreciate your time, your commitment to the Danbury business community. First off, how are you doing? How's your wife Amanda? How's the family and relatives? How's everything on your end?
It's good. It's been a rough couple of months. We did lose two family members to COVID, which was hard. Just they already had underlying health issues. Obviously, it was a surprise, but when we found out what it was, we kind of understood. So we were able to kind of come together. But luckily, my wife's been able to work full time, even though obviously One Plug Entertainment, we do events. So the last couple of months, I've been out of work, but she's been working full time and I've been tutoring, just kind of trying to stay positive. Obviously, I've been better, but I can't complain.
Sure.
There's obviously so much more going on that, I'm one of the lucky ones, as
Yep.
amazing as that is to say. So I'm happy to still be around and just being a kind of right now. I've been helping other businesses just with advice in regards to what they should consider when it comes to reopening and trying to get people back into their business.
Right. Oh, that's good to hear. I'm sorry to hear about your family members passing. We've got some folks that are joining us live here on the chat. I encourage them, if they have any questions for Chase, you can use the chat feature down at the bottom, and we could hopefully answer it in real time. So let's dive right in here. First, let's talk about your business. Can you give a little history to everyone about One Plug Entertainment and how you got to be where you are now today?
Okay, so I've always been involved with music. Oddly enough, I actually got my start selling newspapers for the Danbury News Times. And Sundays when I would have to fill the inserts, I would look through the like Circuit City flyer and I would see all the new CDs. So the money I would make from selling newspapers, I bought CDs, and before you know it, over at Broadview Middle School, one of the teachers, they were like, "I know you know music. Can you DJ one of our dances?" I was like, you know what, why not? So from there, I did that, and that kind of gave me the confidence to kind of keep up with it. So progressively, I got into events. We used to do a lot of events downtown in Danbury, and eventually I went to school for entertainment business. So I went to Full Sail University. I got my bachelor's degree there in entertainment business, and from there, I kind of struggled finding work straight out of school. So I ended up working for Carnival Cruise. I worked for Carnival Cruise, and it was a different experience because I had never been on a cruise, and then to work on it full time,
Right.
definitely an eye opener. But I did have an accident and I was injured on one of the islands. So not too long after that, I decided that maybe being an international DJ wasn't the thing, and I decided to come home. And then from there, I actually had a real hard time struggling to find work, just gainful employment. So I decided to start my own business while I worked full time actually for Danbury Public Schools.
Yeah.
And then just from the grind and the hustle, networking and being able to kind of make those connections, I was able to transition to do my business full time and be able to obviously provide for myself, but make opportunities because my wife, she works with me as well. And then we include my brother and other local people. So it's a small business, but it's a local business. And we try to include local people whenever we can work.
Yeah, absolutely. We had you do the audio for the mayor's debate. Actually, just
Yeah.
back last year, we had you DJ our grand opening at our new offices. So you do a tremendous job, and can't speak volumes enough for your commitment there to your businesses in the community.
Thank
So let's
you.
let's talk about COVID-19, and it's obviously had a big impact on you, events driven, being canceled and or postponed. Walk us through, and you touched us a little bit briefly about what you've been doing, but walk us through how these past few months have been for you and how you've navigated this obstacle.
So at first it was challenging because I really did not expect everything to shut down like that. Like, no weddings, no gatherings, like people, like 5 people or more is not happening. I was like, whoa, and initially I thought, by May, June, things would kind of start to open up, which they are, but just on a larger scale. So the first kind of month or two, I was kind of patient and just waited it out. Luckily, I had done a good job of saving, and I was able to kind of space that out. Once I was able to get some type of unemployment, which took longer than expected, took about 9 weeks. But from there, it gave me a sense of relief that I can continue to be home, because that was the hard part of being home. Typically,
Right.
we do events every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, from sun up to sundown. I'm on the move. So it's gotten me to slow down, but I also, with my wife working home full time, it's been able just for us to like spend quality time together, talk about our plans for the future, and just kind of figure out long term what are we doing after COVID. So I've been really thankful for that. And it's also allowed me to figure out if I'm going to run my business long term, is this sustainable? If it's not sustainable, what are other things I can implement to adapt to the changing landscape of what we do, especially when it comes to events? Typically our business flourishes in both economic hardship and a surplus,
Yeah.
because people want to have a good time when they can afford it, and they want to have a good time when they can't afford it. But now, obviously, with COVID and just being careful when it comes to health and what's the most hygienic practice with a wedding, you're gonna have young kids, people in between, and older adults. I don't expect people to want to risk,
Yeah.
immediate family members. So I understand things might change. You might see more outdoor events and things like that, but just kind of going with the flow. One of the things that I've always done on the side or tried to implement with my business is using entertainment as a marketing tool.
Right.
So working with other businesses to use entertainment to draw customers or bring awareness, which I think is going to be great as we come into the summer months when it comes to local restaurants and outdoor patios and things like that. So I'm hoping to kind of take advantage of that as the summer kind of rolls in.
Excellent. You mentioned you working with the unemployment and the 9-week process. Can you tell us about your experience? I believe you mentioned that you applied through the PPP, right?
I did.
Yeah.
So originally, when it first happened, I applied for whatever I could because I didn't know what was going to happen, what I was going to get. I applied for unemployment, and so long story short, I worked for Danbury Public Schools part-time as a substitute teacher. So technically they had paid unemployment for out of my paycheck. So I was not eligible for self-employed payroll. So every time I would go in there, they're like, oh, you need this code, you need this code. And I would never have this code. I spent weeks calling, like literally I would set aside 2 to 3 hours a day and sit and dial the number. And I actually at times would have 2 phones to hang up and dial the number again as quick as I could to just be in the queue to hope to talk to somebody. And it literally, I want to say it was about 8 or 9 weeks. That's when I actually spoke to somebody. I was like, oh my gosh, like I got a hold of somebody. I was actually so surprised. I almost didn't know what to say because I was caught off guard that somebody picked up the phone.
Right.
So they called somebody, spoke to them. They were able to retroactivate that. But at that same week that I was approved for unemployment, I also got approved for the PPP loan.
Got it.
So what I ended up doing was I collected my back pay, stopped my unemployment, and then transitioned to that because I was like, if I can pay myself and not have to be on unemployment, I would prefer that. Then that was my second challenge. Is I want to say I initially applied for the PPP loan March 30th, 2020. I was contacted May 5th, or actually, I ended up having to resubmit the application again. For some reason, I got an email from the bank telling me to finish it.
Right.
I think this was after we were approved for the second wave of the PPP loans. So I got a call May 5th that I was approved and to send back the paperwork. A week later, I got more paperwork to send back. I sent that back. A week later, I followed up, and then they actually told me that the funds had been available and that they could give me checks to use those funds. So the problem with that was I was already 2 or 3 weeks behind that 8-week schedule, not knowing that the funds were available. So there's been a little confusion, but luckily with my wife working full time, we've been able to not rely necessarily on all these immediate funds. So if they come sooner than later, that would be great. But at the same time, we thought ahead and we're like,
yeah,
nothing's guaranteed.
Sure. I'm glad you're able to navigate it, eventually. All right, so let's pivot here and let's talk about what everyone's talking about, right? Racism, and particularly within the Black community. The chamber, I put a statement out at the end of last week saying I believe that the chamber should play a role in facilitating some of these conversations in our community. So to that end, let's talk about some of these issues. Far too often I've heard the words racism and discrimination used interchangeably, right? In your opinion, why is it important to understand the difference between those two terms?
Okay, so everybody, I'm going to start with this. Everybody is biased. Naturally, we just the way the brain works and the way society has conditioned us, we all have our own bias, whether we're Black, white, or in between. When it comes to discrimination, anybody can discriminate. I can discriminate against a white person. An Asian person can discriminate against somebody who's Latino. Discrimination is just a outward disdain for somebody, whether it's their hair, their gender, their identity. When it comes to racism is an actual system with rules and laws and institutions that are set in place to physically or literally withhold services and different resources specifically to the Black community. And when I say that, is you have to look at slavery, specifically Africans were brought here for slavery. Then as our country eventually developed and became an industrialized nation, we started to invite other immigrant groups over here, which is great. And that's what's made this melting pot. But at the same time, a lot of other groups have gotten priority opposed to the people who were technically at the front of the line. So it's understanding that discrimination is one thing, but racism is a whole network of things that work together to basically disenfranchise this group. And that's why, or especially us. And that's why I think now people are starting to see the bigger picture, because when it comes to George Floyd and I Can't Breathe, it's really the metaphor of the knee on the neck. It's really the symbol of oppression. Because you think about it, people are people, humans are humans, and everybody is capable of living their best life. I can do and be anything I want to be if I can breathe. If I can't breathe, it doesn't matter if the sky is purple or anything, nothing's going to change. I can't breathe. So I think we need to work towards obviously removing these systems of oppression, but also becoming aware of inclusion and deciding that it's not necessarily people of color or minorities that need to be included. We specifically do need to include Black people, as we can see they've been excluded.
Yeah, that's the first time I've heard that metaphor, but I can't breathe.
Yeah, and I mean, that was the interesting thing. I watched the funeral service the other day with Al Sharpton. He spoke so well on it, and it's just like, that's where I really think the outrage comes from. It's really so metaphorical. We all have that sense of that knee pressing on us or somebody sitting on us, and we just want to get up. We just want to breathe. And that's really what we're out in the streets fighting for. You know, it's like we can't breathe, and what can we do, or what do we have to say for everybody else to kind of get that, whether they want to help us or not, but for us to be able to know we have to hold ourselves accountable as well as our neighbors and the other people in our communities.
Well said. Well said. For those that are joining, again, we encourage you to ask some questions. You know, we want to have an open dialogue here, so please, you know, feel free to use the chat feature there. And Chase, I'm sure, will be happy to answer your questions live. So you and your wife Amanda were at both protests, Wednesday and then Saturday here in downtown Danbury, and you and I were chatting. My wife and I were there Wednesday, and just a powerful image to see the amount of individuals coming out Wednesday. What are, and then again Saturday, what are some of your thoughts and takeaways from those protests in our community?
So my biggest thing was I was really impressed about the amount of people and the amount of diversity that came out, and people, there were so many people ready to listen. That's what really was inspiring, because I feel like this time it's not more or less trying to convince people, it's really getting people to open up their ears and understand, you know, because I feel like a lot of people know, and these issues they didn't happen yesterday. It's
Right.
understanding these issues and where the roots in them. It's like if we can weed the garden and we can kind of make the soil fertile again, we can all grow. But at the same time, if there's weeds and the soil's dry and this and that, you know, certain flowers are going to thrive, other flowers may not, and then you got a whole bunch of other things popping up in between. So I think us as a community, it's the time to come together and work together to come with a collective solution. I really think if we can get the organizers collaborating with local officials, where necessarily they can have the formal platform, or maybe I know a lot of it was improv, but like PA stuff. I know at certain times certain speakers didn't project loud enough where the crowd would start to dissipate. But I also think if we felt that the city felt comfortable that we could all come together, we could do this together, and we could make it, we can refine the process where more people, because I do feel like more certain people would have came out, but they weren't sure, especially with the media. A lot of people expect violence. But as what I've noticed, every protest I've been to, specifically in Danbury, has been nothing but peaceful and inspiring. You're seeing people out there with small children. You're seeing older parents out there, young, walking with their young adults. And honestly, I want to say there was a woman that spoke on Saturday, and she actually was walking through the street. She was not part of the protests, and she just started speaking. Everybody had taken a knee for the 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Yeah.
And she actually was walking through the street, and she took the moment to share what she wanted to say. And it was so inspiring that the people in the crowd started to chant, "Give her the microphone."
Yeah.
As everybody kneeled there for that 8 minutes, and she just kind of just said what she had to say off the top of the mind. And it was one of the most beautiful things that any of the speakers had said, because it was unfiltered. It was just authentic.
Exactly. That's amazing. Wasn't aware of that. So a two-part question here. Why is POC, people of color, not politically correct, that terminology? And the second part, what are unique challenges Black people face in society that's different from other minority groups?
So when it comes to people of color, I define that as a loose and ambiguous term where it kind of covers everybody. So I want to use the example, say hypothetically tigers are endangered. There's more tigers in captivity than the wild. And we're like, we really need to help these tigers or they're going to be extinct. We go to Congress. Congress is like, we really think these tigers are important. We're going to fight for this. We're going to fight for this. And then they come up with a plan, and it includes cats. They're like, we know the tigers need help, but we got this plan. And it's going to be for all the cats. So some of the cats don't need the help, but still, we're going to make sure it's equal for everybody, even the people that may be disenfranchised or may need the resources more than the others to even catch up to where those may start.
Right.
And that's my thing. When we use the term people of color, we're including everybody. There are certain non-white groups that identify with being of color, even though they may not be perceived as such. And that's another thing, is because we have to be aware that the moment at hand, we're talking about Black issues. We're talking about the Black community. And I don't want us to get too overexcited about trying to include everybody, because then we get to the point that where we are now, because we did that with civil rights. Black people took to the streets, they marched, they did all this, we got civil rights. And then all the rights went to everybody and not the people who were asking for them. And then more people came over here and had those rights to kind of start ahead, as the other people who fought for those rights are still trying to acquire them.
Okay.
Second part of that question.
Yeah.
I was going to say the second part of that question. Yeah. Can you just read the second part again for me?
Yeah, absolutely. The second part of that was, what are the unique challenges that Black people face in the society that might be different from other minority groups? And you were touching upon that as well, but if you can give some.
I think one of the most difficult things is that through the ideology of white supremacy, other groups of color perceive Black people the same way. So there may be certain ethnic groups that are not white, but they identify with that ideology of white supremacy, and they think Black people are less, or they continue to mistreat Black people or people of color because of their assumptions of what society has influenced them. Another unique challenge, I think, is when it comes to whether it's the workplace, housing, there's this concept of assimilation, where you have people who need to adapt to one group to be able to participate. But then you have other people who can pick and choose when they assimilate. When they're in their culture, they can be of their culture. But then when they go to work or they go to school and things like that, they can identify with the common culture. Me being a Black male, I know typically when I walk in a room, I do tend to stick out because there's not as many African Americans just in the area, but also when it comes to my hair, just what I'm wearing. There's so many times I meet people, and before they ask me my name, before I even know who they are, they'll be like, "What are you?" And it's like they need some type of they need to gauge what level of acceptability I am. Like, if I tell them I'm Black, they're like, "Oh, okay." But then if I was to make up something, or if I say I'm this or that, they're like, oh my goodness. Like it's a completely different reaction. So it's interesting, because me being biracial, my mother is white, I've always kind of had to see things from both sides. And I think that's what's given me a little different perspective, because obviously I've grown up around white people as well as Black people, and I see the difference. Like, I have family members that we don't see eye to eye, and occasionally when I see them, they may not be as inclusive or welcoming as they would to, say, my mom or something of that nature. But at the end of the day, I know what's most important for me is that I have that confidence in myself, and I can't let anybody's opinion or their own validation be how I value my perception.
That's a great segue to another question I have. Can you describe how you can push back against those that are not being inclusive? Again, you said it's even within your own family. I mean, friends, school, community. How do you push back against that?
It really comes to educating and informing people. I think we're at the time where as much shouting and rioting and things like that. That's made the noise. But now we need to get to understanding. We need to understand what are the tangibles. What do we want to see come out of this, and how can we move forward collective as a society? Because you have to understand, when it comes to a society, we're all here together. And if we have a certain group that's not being allowed to function, how is the whole? It's like a clock. If one of the cogs in the clock doesn't work, the time is not right.
Yeah.
And if we want to make sure we're on time, we got to make sure all the cogs are working to make sure that the time and everything is accurate. So that's where I think where if we can get these conversations out there, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's through chambers, I feel like most importantly, we really need to create this dialogue amongst decision makers, because the decision makers are going to be those ones, whether it's an employer, municipality, they're going to be able to affect the trickle down on a local level. And my whole thing is, if we can start locally, then we start on a statewide, then we go on a region wide, and then we can start going on a national scale. And that's why I think even when it comes to police reform, I don't think we need nationwide police reform, especially if you only have bad actors in bad places doing the wrong thing. We can't generalize the police, but we do know police brutality is real. Like, we have footage of it, so it's something that does need to be handled. But if we didn't have systemic racism, I don't think policing really would be the issue.
Yeah, that's what it's
I do see we have a question in the chat.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's see here. Go ahead, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so they're asking about the lack of generational wealth in African American communities and how it affects their overall economic status. That's a great question. So when it comes to generational wealth, it's interesting. Typically, white families tend to acquire 8 times the amount of wealth when somebody passes. And typically, it'll generate 30% more over the lifetime of the holding. Right. Just because obviously, whether it's through a house or different assets that are transferred. And that's one of the largest things that's created the wealth gap, because here's an example. Say, hypothetically, your great-grandparents bought a home in 1948 and they spent $38,000 for it. Your parents grow up there, they eventually get the home appreciated, 2 or 3 times over that 20, 30 years. Then when it's time for them to start their family, they sold that home, had the equity to buy another home, whether it was bigger, and kind of replicate that. So then when their kids go to school, they have money for college and the trickle down. In the Black community, when it comes to the lack of generational wealth, they have to acquire things by borrowing and becoming into these holds of debt. So you're moving forward when it comes to purchasing a vehicle. Well, you don't have enough money to buy a used car. You can afford to lease a car, so then you're overpaying on these things. And then over time, that inexperience of money management from generation to generation is a compounding effect. Just like your retirement, the compounding effect of this money sitting here for 40, 50 years, it grew. But having no money for that same period, how much money did you lose not growing it? So I think that's another thing that when it comes to financial literacy, I think teaching children at a young age how to manage their money is extremely important.
Yeah.
Because that's going to carry over to when it comes to owning your own business, being able to balance a checkbook and maintain, just your way of living. So I think that's something that on an institutional level, maybe when it comes to not only financial services like banks and things like that, working with schools and specifically trying to get programs where we can target youth. Because if we can start from the ground up, that's what's going to make the change 5-10 years from now.
That makes logical sense. And thanks for that question. I appreciate it. Let's flip the script real quick and go back to COVID, and we'll circle back with social justice towards the end. Some of the individuals I've been speaking with, I've been asking them, what have they been missing during COVID-19? Some of the normalcy of life that they had. One person said going out to to get cocktails with their coworkers. One person said going to see the Yankees play. Other one said embracing their grown children. Is there something that's sort of top of mind to you that you've been missing over these past 2.5 months or so?
Traveling.
Traveling.
I work so much that I travel during the week. So like April, I was hoping to go down to Washington, D.C. to see the apple blossoms and little things like that. Because it's hard, obviously, Connecticut's beautiful, but between hiking and all these things, I try to get outdoors as much as I can because I'm home. I'm like, being cooped up here. But I want to say, oddly enough, working.
Yeah.
DJing, you bring so much excitement and pleasure to people's lives. Like I'm literally standing there watching people have the time of their lives. And it's like, there's no money that really could buy that.
Right.
So that's one of the things I do miss. And then another thing is networking. For working from home, it's hard because I do spend a lot of time by myself. So when I'm able to get out in the community, whether it's working, networking, it makes me feel normal because it's that social part of it, as well as I'm still working my business. I'm finding out what's going on and staying in tune. So I know there's a few groups have been doing Zooms. I did 1 or 2 Zoom networking groups. It's fun, but it's not.
It's not the same. Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's our bread and butter as a chamber.
Yeah.
It's networking in face-to-face interaction. I completely agree with you. Nothing's ever going to beat that handshake in person and the eye contact. And it's just different. It's just true. So I got a question about, and I'm very interested to know the answer to this one. As a professional DJ, obviously you have a tremendous list of music in your head. And this is gonna be a tough question, probably the toughest one you'll answer today. Do you have a favorite song? Like just your go-to song, top one, or is that too tough to sort of nail that one down?
It depends for what, for like a party, because I do have a favorite song, like personally for myself, but then like to start a party or a dance, it might be something else. But I would say when it comes to work,
your personal one. I want to know your personal song, favorite one.
I'll
give you some time to think. All right, because let me just.
It really
go ahead.
It would be Get Up, Stand Up.
Okay.
And I wouldn't even say the Bob Marley one because I'm a big fan of Bob Marley and the Wailers. I like Bob Marley as well as Peter Tosh. Oddly enough, people don't know Peter Tosh was supposed to be the front man, but he was too dark. So they made Bob the front man, which I don't think they would have changed their mind because obviously he changed the world. Sure. But it's interesting to see how that dynamic, but that song alone, it's a simple song, but I think it constitutes what's going on today.
Yeah.
And how we still had those issues yesterday. And if we don't take the time to get up and stand up and do what's right, what happens when it happens to us? Yeah. Not to say, I mean us as like a people, Yeah. So I think personally, I would say that's probably my favorite song.
That's very fitting. I'm not sure if you knew this, but I had a side hustle in high school. I did a couple DJ events, not to the caliber of you, but my go-to song to get people dancing, September by Earth, Wind and Fire. That was just like
that's still a classic right now. I actually oddly, that's one of my go-to dance my dance starters. Either that or what? It's funny because the song Uptown Funk, they really used a psychology behind that song because it sounds like an Earth, Wind, and Fire song, and it sounds like a Michael Jackson song.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
2 most popular, artists and bands, they were like, how can we make a song that sounds like that? And it's funny because I can use that song interchangeably with like September or PYT, and it's easy because younger people know it and older people know it. As soon as you get them up, because that's my whole thing is once you start the fire, you just got to feed the flame.
Right.
So it's always a good time. We actually do have a wedding June 27th. It's outdoor.
Yeah.
But it's something. We'll take it, I'm ready to get out there, crack those smiles. It's always good to see everybody having a good, especially after all of this, between the COVID, to George Floyd. I mean,
Yeah.
we all just need a good time.
Yes, I mean, look, but before we wrap up, I'd like to circle back on the social justice conversation. And you alluded to a little bit of what you would like to see happen in terms of the local, state, and then regional. But what would you, if you could expand on that a little bit further, like to see organizations in our community do in order to assist in this conversation? And what suggestions would you have to help drive this movement?
Okay, so I did have a few. I know one of them, I'm gonna just pull up my notes real quick again, but I know one of them I would definitely recommend to businesses and organizations is that Black people want to be treated like people and not customers. So if you welcome people with a greeting and a smile, that goes much farther than how may I help you?
Right.
Or, because there's plenty of times I've arrive somewhere and somebody's looking at me like I'm confused as if I'm in the wrong place, or is there something we can help you with? And I'm like, no, I'm a customer here and I'm here to buy what you guys sell. Oh, okay. So it's funny, but I really think like really starting on a simple thing of just being able to, hey, how's it going? Is there a just I really think becoming pleasant, because there's so many days that if somebody shared a smile with me, I think the interaction would have went so different, or my perception of them. Where's the other solutions? Educating yourself and rewiring your brain. And I will give credit to my wife. She's the one, she's like, we have to do rewiring, because you think about it, these are habits that have been conditioned into us. These aren't intentional actions. It's not like people wake up in the morning and I'm going to discriminate or I'm going to be racist, or that's not their thinking. This is all conditioned in their brain because of the images they've seen, the people who've raised them in their experience. What we have to do is I got to think, hey, the way I just said hi to that person, the way I looked at that person, was that friendly? Would I greet my friend like that? Or, little things like that. Kind of doing the role reversal and put the shoes on. Like, is that how I would like somebody to kind of treat me?
Yeah, empathy. Right.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And like I said before, educating, doing your research. Don't take my opinion. I want you to go out and check the receipts. Please tell me what you think. If there's information you think is helpful, or you think, oh my goodness, I don't know it all. We don't know it all. We have to do this as a collective group. You think about it, the thing that I think most importantly, especially when it comes to America, is that there were two groups that founded this country. And those two groups are still here. And I think more than ever, they need to come together to own the country that is theirs. So then that we can include everyone else. So we can continue to be the melting pot. If the two people if it's like being in a house with parents that are going through the middle of divorce. It's rough for everybody in the house. They're not getting along. And if they're not getting along, then everybody else is kind of chaotic. If we can calm the situation, if we can come up with resolutions where we can get the house in order, then we can start to see the change, and then that's when things improve. You think about all the, I want to say, the talent pool of all these people who have been excluded for years that can finally come in and compete, whether it's in the workplace, housing, education, and make things better, come up with new ideas, new perspectives. If you have a organization that's 90 to 95% or 98% white, or, if you don't have Black people, how do you have that perspective? And it's interesting. I've been looking at different certificates to consider going back to school. And I've been looking in the financial field that the diversity hire is so important right now, because they've noticed financial firms that prioritizing including Black and minorities actually earn 3 to 4 times the amount of revenue per business because of their diversity, their approach to be able to bring in new clients from different backgrounds, as well as retain them.
Right.
So I think that's super important. I do see we have another question. Do we have time for me to answer it? Because I think it's a
Yeah,
good one.
yeah, it was actually pretty similar to what we were talking about. Is there a call to action you want to share to ask the white community to take as a next step?
You know what? My train of thought ran blank real quick because I saw it and I thought of that. It was, oh, okay, now I remember. So a lot of people are familiar with the apartheid situation in South Africa. And once they got over the apartheid, South Africa as a country went to the UN and publicly acknowledged their wrongdoing. And that allowed them to kind of repair the relationship within the country because of the public acknowledgement of what was done and working towards resolving those issues. And they've made great progress from there. And I think one of the issues, especially in America, and we are starting to see this now, is the accountability aspect. If we want to hold police accountable, we also have to hold society accountable. So America as a country needs to be able to acknowledge its wrongdoing, because the only way you can resolve the issue is to come to a common understanding or apologize. But I think if we had that on a national level for everybody to understand, because I feel like there are certain groups and certain like individuals that they don't understand that part. They don't understand the integral part of African Americans to the development of this country. And then once we have a general understanding of like, okay, all of this is here because of these things, then we have that understand as a society, well, these people are important. I wouldn't have this if we didn't have that, kind of that trickle down effect. But I do think somewhere, whether it comes down to local levels or things like that, us as a community being able to say, this was wrong. We understand that this was wrong, and we're ready to listen on how we can repair these things. Because I can't give you a solution today, but if we at least have the platform to work towards those solutions or create those conversations, hopefully we can see some progress.
Sure. Excellent. Well said, Chase. All right. So I think we'll wrap up now. Thanks for your time, Chase.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm
appreciate
glad I was able to share my knowledge, and hopefully we can continue to have these conversations and make sure we can see those change, and hopefully it just makes our community a better place.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that is the goal here, to sort of continue having these conversations. And I look forward to working with you, not just to help address these issues, but beyond as well, right?
Absolutely.
I know you're very involved in the business community, so thank you. And we have several webinars coming up over the next couple of days, chamber chats as well. So please keep everyone's eyes and ears open for those. Chase, thanks again. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Tell
Everybody stay safe.
Well, absolutely.
All right.
Stay healthy and stay safe, right?
You got it.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks.
Black Lives Matter.
Take care.